Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm George Blitch. Today, I got to sit down and chat with Kent Boucher, who is involved with a bunch of different really cool stuff. He's the host of the First Gen Hunter podcast, which kind of traces his roots to getting into hunting. And I mean, there's so much more. He has so many amazing guests that talk about the outdoor world and hunting, some entertainment, some educational, but there's always an element of really great content there. He also hosts the Prairie Farm Podcast, which is associated with Hoksey Native Seeds, which he works with as well. And man, we just covered so much ground today. Kent is really a great person. He's also involved with Sharing the Land with Doug Duran, which I and my company, Matt My Rancher, are part of. So we talked a little bit about that, as he's kind of the cooperating landowner there, and also being a sponsor and a partner with that. So we just covered a lot of ground. It was a really fun podcast. I had a blast. I can't wait to get this out there, and have all the feedback from you guys and what you've learned from Kent, because there's a lot there. So without further ado, here is the podcast with Kent Boucher. Hey, Kent, how you doing today, man?
No, I'm doing pretty good. I have a little Bell's palsy going on right now. Half my face is numb. I made it to 34 years before I ever had to have a filling put in. And so I just had my first filling. And I thought, I got to be honest with you here, I put down the time. For some reason, I only saw the 2 on the time for today's interview. So I put it down for 2 o'clock, and I told them right before, they numbed me up, which, by the way, I asked, is this really something I need? Do I need to be numbed? You're just kind of like shaving off part of it's not like you're cutting into anything or something. My wife says I made the right choice to get the numbing, but it seems to be like lasting forever. But anyways, I asked them, I was like, I got a podcast interview at like 2. Am I going to sound like a drunk and they're like, oh no, it'll be worn off by then. Well, then I found out it's at noon. So I might be drooling out of this side of my face a little bit and slurring my words. I'm not a day drinker. I don't have some kind of problem here. It's just my face is numb. So
Well, and
thanks for having me on, man.
yeah, you're welcome. And it's quite the opposite. I mean, 34 years without a filling, that is not a
Hey,
problem. That is something to be proud of. So, we'll celebrate that instead of looking at the drool on your face. We'll
yeah,
just edit that out.
that's
It's kind
good.
of dark lit. So yeah, no one will see. And all the audio people,
Yeah.
they won't
That
know. That's
that
fine.
that works. That works. Yeah, I'm trying to game my screen here a little bit more, my camera here to get better lighting. I'm at the library. I live out in the sticks, which this from interviewing hunters all the time. We all have interesting internet connections. We're hotspotting from our phones. For me, I got the Elon Musk Starlink internet, which works pretty good, but it still tends to cut out when I do podcasts. So I came to the library. I even got a library card last week. I was on Jake Hofer's podcast, the Land Podcast.
Mhm.
Um, so I got a library card, got reservations made for the study room here, but the lighting is a little interesting in here, so I might look like I'm in a cave with a half numb face. But other than that, it should be a great episode, everyone. So thanks for tuning in.
That is awesome. It's all the intro they need. That's perfect, man.
That's right.
Well, I figured let's go back, and you're talking about the podcast that you have, which is the First Gen Hunter podcast.
Right.
Obviously, you have the
Yep.
Prairie Farm podcast as well. But being a first gen hunter, I mean, we all kind of know what that means. You're the first generation hunter, but
Yeah.
I kind of want to, before we get into that, and I think it kind of, let's thread that needle there too. Let's talk about
Yep.
how you kind of grew up, and then how you got exposed to hunting in the outdoor world, and then eventually kind of then launching a podcast talking about that and interviewing people through your process. And at Mark Kenyon, there's a lot of people that you learn from along the way, but
Mhm.
let's maybe kind of just start at the very beginning and go from there, and then we can kind of pick up on your career in the outdoors, and go talk a little bit more about that and Hoksey Seeds as well.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, first gen hunter, it is what it sounds like. I'm a first generation hunter, and there's always some technicality, or not technicality, but some like a little bit of. I mean, we're all here. I think it was Donnie Vincent. I once heard him say in a video, you are here. He's addressing anyone who's watching the film because your ancestors were very skilled hunters at one time, meaning they didn't starve to death long enough for the family tree to include you. And so we all have, a true first gen hunter in our family line somewhere. But in the numb is the key word of the podcast, I think, and the numbing of our senses to, how do we provide for our needs and wants that's taken place really, especially, if you go the further east you go, eventually you hit like another continent, of course, but even in our country, you can trace that development line, right? Just look at the year your state was established when it got statehood, and then even looking when the first colonies and settlements and stuff started showing up. I think that numbing of senses as society set itself up happened earlier along the way, but even here, where Iowa, which is where I was born, became a state in 1846, which is on the later side for our country. I was born far enough, past that point that there wasn't a need to go and hunt and gather food anymore. And, every town, or of any size has a grocery store or a gas station. And so, my family got away from hunting, probably, I don't know, maybe 100 plus years before I was born, and so I had it. My grandfather on my mom's side, he hunted growing up a little bit. He lived on the farm that I live on now. We could talk about that at some point. It's kind of an interesting story, but he had done some hunting. My grandmother, so that grandfather's wife, she grew up in Wisconsin, which Wisconsin is we have a mutual friend up there, Doug, and Wisconsin is probably, I mean, if you had to say what states represent hunting, well, you'd have where you're at, Texas, of course, but Wisconsin would make the top 5 as well.
Sure.
It's just like, and so I had family up there that hunted, but I live down here in Iowa, and I wasn't really around it. And when I was, just after I was born, probably, my dad had a coworker / friend, they were pretty close to, who took a kid out for a hunt, and they had a hunting accident. The kid accidentally shot my dad's friend and killed him, and just a terrible tragedy. And of course, all the trauma for that family and for this poor kid who it's just an accident. Now he's got to live with that for the rest of his life. All the grief, all the trauma, and then the trauma for my parents is losing their friend. That was like, okay, yeah, I know Grandpa did some hunting maybe every once in a blue moon when I was growing up, but it wasn't necessary. You don't need to hunt for anything. So why would you run that risk of going out there and having some terrible hunting accident, all for, the sake of some hobby that you're doing for fun? And because of that, even though I had some of that hunting, I guess, in a way which wouldn't have made me truly a first gen hunter, I was insulated from it, and I was kept from it. And I never had an opportunity. But that being said, I knew Grandpa had firearms. I knew my cousins up in Wisconsin and my uncles up in Wisconsin, they would talk about hunting and stuff like that. So it kept me interested, right? And kind of fascinated with it. And I mean, George, you're probably similar to me in age. You probably remember the days when you wanted to find information on like some little niche thing, you just couldn't go on the internet and find that stuff. You had to like come across a random, right. Yeah. You had to come across like a random magazine or newspaper article. Yep. And every time I did something about hunting, I would just drink it up, but it remained, because you didn't have that unlimited access to it, it remains some kind of a mystery to you as well, which I think just builds on it just like turns that interest into almost this like this undying thing in the back of your mind, even though you don't get to know much about it. And my dad grew up a city slicker just across the Missouri River from Omaha, in the town of Council Bluffs, Iowa. And it's probably around 60,000 people, so not huge, but definitely an urban area. And he grew up in the heart of the city. And so hunting nobody in his life hunted, you know what I mean? But he was a part of the Boy Scouts, so he liked to go out backpacking and fishing and camping and stuff like that. So he would take me and my brothers. I have two younger brothers. He would take us out to I can never remember I think it's Absaroka. I always want to say that or Absaroki, but I'm pretty sure it's Absaroka. Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness in southwest Montana. And we would go backpacking and fishing for trout. And I noticed I didn't say fly fishing there. I'm not one of those, backcast snobs. I wish I was. I wish I could do that. I just don't have time for everything I want to do, and you got to kind of like filter it down. Maybe after my kids are all graduated and stuff, I'll have time to master the true fly rod thing. But yes, people, we use spinning rods and bubbles. Or it's not, what do they call them? The fly fishing where floats, bobbers, right?
Yep.
We'd use them, and we'd catch a lot of trout too. And we'd of course use, little spinners and stuff like that, but we'd backpack way in there, this wilderness area. And that's where I first started to like get this bigger sense of what nature is. This isn't just a walk in the park. This isn't just, even like a state park here in Iowa, that's maybe a couple hundred acres, of countryside. There's pristine wilderness out there. And that, of course, flips it into hyperdrive there, this interest of getting into hunting. And then as I got older, we started taking some canoeing trips up to the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota, just south of the Canadian border there. And we would do, some camp outs while we were doing these trips and stuff like that, and do some fishing and just exploring and so forth. And so my dad, even though he wasn't a hunter, he was an outdoorsman, and that helped me develop skills and interests that translated over to when I was able to finally, I was out of college and married, and my wife got me a Remington 870 for a wedding present. And
you married well then.
That's right. And then we bought a bird dog. We were still living in an apartment, but we were in the process of buying our first house. And we're like, let's get a dog. We're moving into our house, and my grandparents, I had never gone hunting yet at this point. My grandparents had some rat terriers. And so this is kind of an interesting story because it ties in Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was a big fan of the rat terrier. It's just a dog that has Teddy Roosevelt's personality, right? I'll fight him. Like if there was a dog to charge San Juan Hill, it was going to be a rat terrier. And so we had this. We had picked out a puppy from my grandparents, and yep, see, there I am. I'm drooling now. I'm out of my numb face. But we had picked out this dog from my grandparents, and we were going to name it Teddy because we knew Theodore Roosevelt liked rat terriers, or we were going to name him Theo. That's what we were going to name him. And we were all ready to go with this. We were all excited about it. And then the mother, because she had a really hard time. She was an older dog when she had these puppies. She like lashed out and killed all the puppies. It's terrible, like, whoa, and we were dead set on getting a dog at this point. And we're like, man, now what do we do? We really wanted that puppy. Where are we going to find a dog? So we start like looking into classifieds, online and in the newspaper. And there's this guy from a couple hours away selling purebred Brittany. So some people know them as Brittany Spaniels. And I think the AKC, American Kennel Club, dropped the Spaniel off officially like in the 80s or something. So everyone just calls them Brittany's now. Mm-hmm. We had some American Brittany puppies that were purebred, $400 a piece. Can you believe that? I mean, try finding that. So we were like, wow, we like look up on the AKC, their temperament, what kind of lifestyle. Classic hunting dog, right? Classic bird dog.
Yep.
So long story short, I ended up with a Brittany pup named Theo and a Remington 870, and it was time to finally start hunting, right? And so go to Grandpa's farm, the farm I live on now, and grandpa walked with me the first time. He was already into his 70s, so he didn't, go the whole way, but kind of showed me the ropes a little bit. Took Theo along, and we started learning how to hunt together. And Theo was a lot better at it than I was for the for the first few years. But that was really what got the ball rolling, was ending up with a weapon, kind of being at that point in my life where I'm in control of my own destiny, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And my wife gave me that 870 and picking up Theo, and I did then too. So I went hunting that first time, and then the next time I went hunting, I decided to deer hunt with that 870. I did that totally all by myself on Grandpa's farm. And man, did I make some boneheaded mistakes. But what was interesting was while we were doing that pheasant hunt with Grandpa, I laid eyes on my first like true Iowa giant buck, and I didn't know what I was looking for growing up, but here I was out pheasant hunting, and here's this giant 170s double drop time. He's got like 10-inch double drops. Wow. and just an absolute slob. I have a grainy cell phone picture of him on my phone somewhere. But that is like, okay, I'm going deer hunting now.
Right.
And from there, I haven't looked back, So that's the story of becoming a first gen hunter.
So then you decided at some point in time to launch your podcast. I think you're nearing 200 episodes. This has been around a lot. I know you have, Pick and Bones and the series and different things that you're doing within that. And, I kind of want to talk more about that too. But when did you make that decision to then kind of launch this podcast? What was your reasoning behind it? What was it that you wanted to achieve? Was it just a documentary thing at first, or was it like, did you have this, idea that I'm going to help other people? And kind of talk to me about that idea, because not everyone launches podcasts. It's not something. It's more of a medium that people have used, but to do that and to be as successful as you have with that and with your other podcast, I was just kind of curious where that background kind of came in and how you went full force with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, in a previous career, I was a biology teacher, a high school biology teacher. And so communicating was what I got paid to do, right? Mm-hmm. I was paid to talk, as you can probably tell, as I rant and ramble through this.
You're podcast. Good at it. Yeah.
But no, I knew how to communicate pretty well, as a teacher. And we talked about Mark Kenyon earlier, and really Mark's podcast, Wired to Hunt. I found that kind of by accident. I was trying to stay awake on my way to go for a December deer hunt, and I was driving after work one night, and I have a terrible problem of like becoming narcoleptic while I'm it's terrible. Like sometimes you wake up and you're like hitting the rumble strips type of thing. And but what would help me is if I had like good talk radio to listen to, music, there's only so much you can only listen to, like so much, Boston or Queen, classic, like heavy hitting songs, Led Zeppelin or, there's only so much you can do to like keep yourself awake with music, I have found. And one thing that would keep me awake is good, engaging conversation and content, because I love to learn. I like to read. I like to listen to things. I like to watch how-tos and things like that. And so I was like, if I could only, and I'd just be hitting scan on AM radio. Please let there be something, like some sports talk or something, and I could, it'd always come up empty. And I was like, you know what? There's these things called podcasts, and I know people like to listen to podcasts, and maybe they got one on a topic that I like. And so one of the things I love doing, in fact, I did this, I think for a year or two before I started hunting, is shed hunting. I was maybe there's a podcast out there on shed hunting. So I just like type in shed hunting into Apple Podcasts, and back when they called it iTunes, of course. Right. Boom. Mark Kenyon interviews Joe Shed from, the writer of the only book on shed hunting. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. And that kept me awake and alive all the way to my destination for that December hunt with my brother. We were meeting there. And from that moment on, I got hooked to Mark's podcast. And I just drank it up. There's so much good information on there, episode after episode. It just supercharged my rate of growth as a first gen hunter. And yeah, I listened to that helped me get there. And I just remember having this thought. It's like, man, Mark is so smart to start doing this. No one else is doing this yet, and I looked back, started doing some more research into how long he'd been going, and he's already been going for a few years at this point. I think a year or two probably a year. See, that probably would have been 2015 or 2016 when I started listening. I think his first episodes, I think maybe came out in 2014, if I remember right. I'm not sure.
Recounting his 2013 hunting season. Yep.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then I found he'd been kind of doing the Wired to Hunt website and blog since like 2009 or something like that. And I'm like, man, that is so smart that he saw that opportunity to do that. It's like, I wish I had done that. And I always was like, in the most with admiration, not like true jealousy or envy or whatever, but it's just like, man, I wish I had done that. It's like, dang it, Mark, why'd you steal that idea? I wish I had figured that out. But so I always thought, it's like, well, maybe I could do that. And his co-host Dan Johnson, he's from here in Iowa, and Dan talked. So Mark was already doing this full time at that point, and he was always like, encouraging Dan, when are you going to go full time with your show, man? He was running Nine Finger Chronicles and what used to be known as Sportsman's Nation, now is known as Sportsman's Empire. And Dan's talking about how, I just can't. It's enough for me to do as a side gig, and makes a little bit more money on the side for to cover a lot of my hunting expenses. Well, that was something I could relate to, because I was starting to have a family, and hunting's expensive, right? You ever see that meme where it's like this father and son, they're walking across this like duck pond, they're like got all these decoys hanging off of them or whatever. And the son's like, Dad, is there any way to become a millionaire through hunting? And his dad responds like, yeah, son, start out as a billionaire. And it's like, that is so true. It's so expensive, especially being a first gen hunter where you're starting from, square one. You have nothing, to get going with hunting gear wise. And I was like, this can really become a selfish endeavor. I'm a school teacher. I'm not a billionaire. and it's all this time by myself that's just really focused on of course, I shoot something, bring it home, and the family gets to eat that and they get that part of it, that's great. But it's a lot of time still. And, is there a way I can make this time useful to others? And is there a way I can do something to kind of help offset the costs of hunting? And so I had always had the podcast idea in the back of my head after listening to Mark's show, Wired to Hunt, and hearing what Dan had to say and about making enough money to cover his hunts on the side. And I thought, maybe I can start in that in the summers, because as a teacher, you have summers off, and that's a lot of time to be working on something. I thought, and this was a stupid thought, but I thought, or misguided thought, I'd be able to like record all these episodes in the summer and then release them throughout the year. Yeah, right. Not going to happen. And so in 2020, we had the big shutdown for schools, and I was just slammed with work that year. I switched to a new district. Is actually the district I graduated from, and I took on a heavier course load when I did it. I knew that I was probably going to be moving to where I live now, which was a couple, 2.5 hours away from where I was living at that time. Okay. And I wanted a chance to kind of teach at that school before I made this big move from the area. So I switched over there, and I was just swamped with work. I was teaching AP biology for the first time, which is a college level course. And it's just tons and tons of work, plus the other stuff I had, the other classes I had. Well, then COVID hits, and you go from, you might think I'm exaggerating here, but I was working 100-hour weeks, and I'd worked, I was like close to 80 days in a row I'd been working. So that includes weekends. I was working any moment that I was awake. I was basically working, and I was depressed, man. I was just like, it was brutal. Well, then COVID happens, and I don't want to minimize all the terrible stuff that came along with that for people. Obviously, my wife, she's a nurse. She was a ICU nurse at the time, so she saw the worst of that stuff. So I don't want to minimize that from anyone, but I guess a positive to come out of a bad situation was, a lot of families got to spend more time together. People got outside more, and they got time to try some new things. And for me, that was podcasting. And so I went ahead and launched First Gen Hunter at that time. And I should also mention, I'd already been writing for an Iowa hunting and fishing magazine at that point. And I was already starting to generate some income off of producing hunting content, which was really cool to get that first article published and like see that and then get the check. And it's like, what, and so I was already having some experience with that. I was listening to all these podcasts, these hunting podcasts. You and I are both big meat eater fans. And I read Steve's book. I think the first one I read was just Meat Eater, and then read American Buffalo, and loved the show, loved the podcast, saw how all these guys were creating this really powerful, really interesting content. And I thought, you know what, maybe I could try doing something like that. And so 2020, that's when I launched into it. And since then, it's kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit. Picked up some sponsors, which has been great. Again, helps pay for the hunts. Got to go on this awesome Northwest Montana bear hunt back in 22, and going out to Nebraska this winter, and that stuff pays for a lot of those expenses, doing the podcast and writing and so forth. And so it's kind of helped me reach some of those goals. I hope I keep growing, and I quickly found that money wasn't enough of a motivator, and that's good. That's good that I figured that out, because yes, it is a motivator, but it's a bottomless motivator. You'll never have enough money to like truly make you feel like you've reached your goal. You know what I mean? And so my focus has shifted through the years. And of course, this was always a big part of my focus, was not just how can I financially set myself up better as a hunter and set my family up better, primarily being the goal. How can I just be a positive voice within the hunting community? And I sensed that, yes, I have a unique story that people may be interested in hearing as being a first gen hunter, but I think I also have a relatable story, especially in 2020, when all these people were trying hunting out. They started to see the food chain failing them a little bit. Remember how scary it got there for grocery store people that survive off the grocery store. You might show up, there might not be anything there for you. And so I sensed that my message could resonate with all these people who were considering getting into hunting. And that's even expanded since then to now everyone. How can I just look at hunting more critically? This show has evolved as I do. I've gotten older since then, right? I've had hundreds, if not thousands, of more hunting hours under my belt since I started that show. So the show should be evolving to include more people as well. So I've worked hard to do that as well, and just be a good influence in the hunting community, and maybe something that's fun to listen to, and something that can keep you awake when you're driving to your your destination late at night after work to go hunting, And so
full circle.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's that's really the target now, and then going into the Prairie Farm Podcast. I got out of teaching after the 2021-2022 school year. We made that big move that I talked about, moved to the family farm. And I as bad as that one year was with all those hours, just from like a difficulty with a job, was the worst year. 21, 22 school year was just misery. I had already been like, like I'd already seen enough of this other life through producing content, like seeing like there's other things out there, Kent. And when we made the move, I just had to take whatever job opportunity like really opened up. And it was a middle school science job. And I quickly found that I was meant to, if I'm going to teach, I'm meant to teach high schoolers, not middle schoolers. And that was hard on me, man. It was really hard on me. But I'm thankful for that time, because what it taught me was it's okay to let teaching go now. You tried. You've done it at these two different levels that you're allowed to teach at. Because I always wondered, when I was teaching high school, I had to put a ton of time into lesson planning, because you're teaching complex stuff that you may not have really messed with since you were in college or even high school,
Sure.
So there's a lot of studying that goes into that lesson planning to make sure you have good stuff for the kids to be learning. And I thought, well, maybe if I went down to middle school, it'd just be like, cakewalk. And content wise, yeah, pretty much was that. But I found that doesn't work for me. I can't just go through the motions on something. I want it to be meaningful, but also, students coming out of COVID, for those first couple semesters after COVID it was brutal getting them back into learning mode and getting them into, being at school and being on a schedule that's set for you instead of one that you're choosing all the time. And so there was just so much of that it was like, okay, I have time now. I've done it for 8 years. Time to try something else. So I took a job at Hoksey Native Seeds. I knew if I was leaving teaching, I knew that teaching is a job that makes a difference, right? There's a lot of altruistic benefit that comes from that. So I wanted to do something else that would provide the, altruism through maybe another way. And I knew I was very passionate about conservation. That goes hand in hand with being a biology teacher, where you're learning about ecosystems, you're teaching about ecosystems. And I actually, growing up, I wanted to farm, but it's very hard to do that without a huge operation, unfortunately, anymore. And Grandpa only owned 240, which is great, great for hunting. So I found this job where it kind of merged all those things: a little bit of hunting, a little bit of conservation, a little bit of farming, and that was at Hoksey Native Seeds. And so once we got there, I was like, hey, we should do a podcast. I do a podcast. We should do a podcast. So we started the Prairie Farm Podcast there as well. Sorry, that was a really long answer, man.
No, that's great. No, I mean, I think it sets up everything, because it really kind of gives your background on how you kind of got involved. And then obviously I want to dive into a little bit more to Hoksey Native Seeds and like what your role is there, and my family property. My wife and I, when we first got our place, we basically had cleared out a bunch of land and got a bunch of the native seeds and forbs that were from that area and kind of invested into that and trying to do a lot.
Man. That's great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we did, I think, like 23 acres. We have a little over 300. So it was,
that's awesome.
We're trying to get a little bit more, but the gentleman we're working with, he was towards the end of his retirement. And I think he just finally said, I'm done. He's like, we were supposed to get 50 acres. We got like 26 or whatever it was. But in the event that I started researching about seed companies and just a whole other world I didn't know about, as far as like how they're harvesting their seeds, what they're doing, the differences of what you need to plant, why and when, the benefits of the soil, the benefits of the habitat. And so I found that fascinating. So, and we'll dive into our connection here with Doug a little bit later on there too. But that was something that I had never talked to anybody who really, worked, except for a few people that I called when we were looking to buy seeds. So I have definitely a lot of questions, and I'd love for you to kind of talk about what it is running a seed company, and kind of, how, what your role is with it.
Yeah. Those are great questions. And man, my hat's off to you and your wife for making that decision to roll with some native seed on your property and reestablish those things and encourage that. I mean, you couldn't have a healthier ecosystem than to have the things that actually belong there. Well, everyone, you might notice I sound a little more clear now. My face is no longer no, actually it's I just realized I had this nice Shure mic here, the one that I use for my podcast, and I didn't have it selected as the microphone to be being used while George is recording me right now. So I switched to that mic. That's why it sounds a little different now. But anyways, and my face is less numb, so I probably sound a little better that way too.
Yeah, it's good. As we're
But
progressing, we're improving along the way. That's what you
that's
do,
right.
especially when
That's
you're
right.
planting native seeds. You're improving the habitat. We're improving the podcast. You
Man,
sound deep and rich.
that was a great transition there.
Thanks, man. That's
That-
probably the only good one I'll have today. So we'll just stick with that one. Here it is. It's been thrown down. The
no,
pivot has
that's
been made.
yeah, that hey, we'll take it. We'll take it.
Indeed.
But yeah, so choosing to go with native seedings on your property is one that's beyond just, well, our mutual friend again, Doug Duran, has his famous phrase, it's not ours, it's just our turn. And when you are growing native plants on your property, when you're giving up acres that, yeah, you could turn in for a temporary cash payout, um, you're actually gaining something that is worth something that money can't actually buy, really, which is long-term sustainability of that land for the people coming after you, whether that's even in your family or it's somebody else's family. You go to the other great conservation phrase, um, generosity is planting a tree that you'll never get to enjoy the shade of.
Yep.
I butchered that somehow, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You're setting up the next person, or even in the case of an ecosystem, the other organisms that are going to be using that ground. You're setting them up better than what you had it. And that's a sacrifice that you guys made, and one that, I tip my hat to you for doing that. But
Cheers. Thank you. Well, and
yeah.
this is something you're dealing with on a day to day for people who are doing
Mm-hmm.
this, with Hoksey Native Seeds. And I was curious about your role when you've kind of now been in this for a couple of
Yeah.
years. What is it that, I mean, you're seeing this around and people are using this, and I'm sure that you're talking to land users, as they're doing this for the first time. They're the first gen land improvement
Yeah.
folks, and kind of talk to me about that role and like, what it is that how this operation works for. I mean, a lot of people probably don't know how seed companies really truly work and how you're going to this place and buying these seeds, and they might know from then on and how to plant and what it's doing, but getting them into people's hands, I don't know that process. I know a lot of people don't. I'd love to talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Those are some great questions. So my official title is production manager. So I am, I've been there for a year and a half now, but I'm still learning every single day, right? There's a lot of things it's my second, third, 50th time around doing it, and hopefully I'm getting better in that way. But um, I have a great privilege in that I'm learning under a true expert, like somebody who is as good as it gets in the prairie world. Like one of the things I've noticed now, going from the more of the blue or the white collar way of living, job, that kind of thing, being a teacher, desk job type thing, to now truly a blue collar job, is that there's both sides of any kind of industry need each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need the college professor who is, educating people about, the biology going on behind this plant, the way an ecosystem works together. But that head knowledge only gets you an understanding of what's happening. To actually be able to make use and to test out these hypotheses or even theories on how this is the best way to help a prairie ecosystem, you got to have that blue collar experience there of that person who's been there, done that, and to see how it actually plays out in the real world. And so a lot of my college experience was that first part of like just understanding ecosystems, understanding, plant health and the need for diversity on the landscape, all that stuff. But now I'm getting to work with somebody who's been doing this for 40 years, and my boss Carol Hoxbergen, and and you know, there's not a person out there that understands how to grow prairie better than Carol does. And so as production manager, you know, getting to sit under him and learn how to plant prairie, how to care for prairie, how to harvest prairie, how to clean the seed that we harvest, how to then get the seed ready to be planted again for the customers or for us, even if we're, you know, expanding a field or something. That's priceless experience. You know, that's so I'm very privileged in that way. But yeah, as far as my responsibilities go, is to learn and do all of those things. And so most of my time is spent outside or in the shop. I'd say um, from just a straight hour standpoint, most of my year is probably spent cleaning seed because starting really now, we're getting into cleaning. So I run the seed through these different seed cleaners that we have to get it ready for sale. And then, of course, that has to be seed tested by third parties to make sure, you know, the seed has good germ. It's not loaded with weed seeds and, you know, the weight, what's a live seed weight in that mix and all that stuff. So that's a huge part of my job. And then I also spend a lot of time in field maintenance, so weed control
Mm-hmm.
and you know, even soil quality control, do some of that work. Um, uh, you know, operating equipment, I do a lot of that. And working on equipment, which was probably the scariest thing for me going into this. Like I know, you know, I'm fairly handy. My dad is very handy as far as like working on the house and stuff like that. And so you know, I'm familiar with tools and things like that. I hate doing housework though. I hate working on the house. I'm glad I can do it, but as I always tell my wife, I'd rather be shed hunting or I'd rather be hunting, you know,
Yep. Yep.
than working on the house. But so learning to work on all this farm equipment from my boss, Carol, he's had to really teach me a lot of things, but I found that I've actually really enjoyed doing that. So I do that quite a bit. And then, you know, the podcast, which is really just kind of like the cherry on top for all that. You know, I still get to have that little education side. And another part that's kind of an expanding role, and you talked about this with first time prairie people, is I get to do quite a few property visits and, you know, write up habitat plans for people, which goes hand in hand with the first gen hunter stuff because I interview the, you know, habitat specialists all the time, and well, not all the time, but pretty
Yeah. Yeah.
often,
Yeah.
and so I've learned a ton from them. Get to use my science and ecology background, and now having that practical experience from working with this stuff, you know, those are like the moments where I feel like everything kind of culminates together to like this is what you've been prepared for, you know, this and you know, you it's honestly crazy, George. Like I told my mom this the other day. I was talking to her on the phone and I said, you know, most days I'm doing the things that I would be doing if I was just spending some free time. And now I'm getting, you know, I'm doing it for a job. And so it's a really awesome role there. We're a small company though. You know, we have myself, we have another part-time office person, and we have a full-time office person, and then of course Carol, who's full-time as well. And he kind of just makes sure everything stays running for everybody, and we're making the right decisions and coaching us up on how to do stuff better. And he does a lot of the operating as well, which he's earned that right. You know, get in the tractor cab instead of being on the seed cleaner or something like that. That's kind of how we break it down, and of course run the podcast and everything else. So, but yeah, I think you know, if we're gonna have more people viewing the land like you and your wife did, we got to show them how to grow prairie first of all, you know, so that takes away some of that fear and that apprehension. But then we're just right hand in hand with that is educating why you need it. So first of all, you got to be able to see that it can be done, but then you got to see, okay, now that you know that it can be done, it should be done because of X, Y, and Z. And so that's really what a big part of my job is as well.
Yeah. Well, man, it sounds like you found the balance of all these different things. And it's fun that they
Mm-hmm.
kind of overlap and that you're being a teacher to new people still.
Right. Yeah,
And being able to
exactly.
kind of have that role and maybe a different, environment, but it's still there and you're still facilitating that and kind of, giving back. And it's so important, man. I really wanted to, you know, you mentioned earlier about Doug, and I want to talk about the role too and how you guys are working with them and with
Yeah.
sharing the land, and how because you guys are partners, and then
Yep.
you're working with them, and with my company, Map My Ranch, and we had sent out a map of Hoksey Native
Yeah.
Seeds and how that
They're beautiful.
oh,
Go
cheers, man.
get your map from Map My Ranch, people. George does not pay me to say this. It's the real deal, and it's so useful and so practical. I'm actually very excited for so maybe I'll just work this into kind of what you're saying there. But I think you were still saying something. So I just wanted to give that little plug for Map My
Oh,
Ranch there.
well, thank you very much. No, I mean, that's how I started out. Like my buddy Colin and I, we made a map to use on our ranch to be able to like have that as a tool. And then someone
Hmm.
else was like, saw it and they're like, you should map my ranch. And another guy said, you should map my ranch. And Colin and I looked at each other and we're like, maybe we should be doing this on our little side thing. I mean, and it's grown from there and, partnerships with Doug and Onyx and just some amazing groups and people along the
Yeah.
way. But, you're utilizing it as a tool
Hmm.
for what y'all are doing, which was the whole purpose was to be able to try to facilitate that for other people and doing the exact same thing we thought was useful for us. So, let's kind of jump into all that if we can, as far as with
Yeah.
you're working with sharing the land and with Doug, how you guys met them, and let's run through that if you would mind.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned earlier in the interview, uh, being a big fan of Meat Eater, you start to see all these guys popping up there, and there's two ways you can look at that, right? You can look at it as, wow, that's a really cool person. I would really like to just talk to that person because they're really cool. Or you can look at it as, wow, that's a really, you know, interesting person, really famous person. I need some of their clout, and that's not good, right? That's you're using people at that point and you're I don't know, it's like, yeah, you're using people. We could just probably leave it there. It's short-sighted. I don't know. But from watching all these, this Meat Eater content through the years, listen to Mark's podcast, of course, and they bring in all these new personalities along the way, and you get to see them. Do you remember the film that Meat Eater did? Oh man, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago now. Stars in the Sky.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, great
my
documentary.
yeah, just tremendous film. And my absolute favorite part of that was Doug's part where he was explaining his connectivity to his family farm, the Duran family farm. And and it almost inspired like an emotional response in me when I just saw how much he cared about that, because I felt the same way about my family farm. This is a place, we bounced around quite a bit as a kid, moving around as my dad would take new jobs and stuff. And the one constant place was the family farm. My grandfather was born in the bedroom that he was sleeping in, and he's still alive. But he had to move out of the house because he's in his 80s now, and a big old 2-story farmhouse is too much for,
Yeah, it's a lot to manage.
an 85-year-old to keep up on. And so they asked us if we wanted to buy the house from him. But up until he left, so I think they moved out when he was 84. He was sleeping in the room that he was born in. So I felt like my experience, my passion for my family's farm mixed in with hunting and enjoying the outdoors, having a conservation mindset like Doug has. It's like, man, I would love to connect with that guy, get to know him, and just really get to sit down and talk with him, and be cool if we became friends through the process. Even that'd be great. And so when we were doing our podcast, we started out with the Prairie Farm Podcast, um, and I had actually messaged Doug a little bit about some of his CWD understanding, right? Because Doug is a lay person. He's not like a, an animal pathology specialist or anything like that. He's just a guy, a concerned landowner, a concerned hunter, concerned conservationist who wants to know more about this. And I asked him about some stuff because I have some family that lives near where Doug lives, and I was concerned about bringing CWD back to Iowa, and so we talked a little bit about that. But then we started the podcast, the Prairie Farm Podcast, and I was like, you know what? My coworker's name is Nicholas. Is like, we should interview this guy named Doug Duran up in Wisconsin. Has a very strong conservation ethic, cares a whole lot about his family farm. That's what we want people to get that vision when they tune into our content. We want them to value the land that they have control over, whether that's their little yard in town or maybe 5,000 acre operation here in Iowa or something. And so we got in contact with Doug, met him at Pheasant Fest up in Minneapolis, met him in person, and had a great time talking. And we arranged this time for Nicholas and myself to go visit Doug at the Duran family farm, which is just like, I'm like pinching myself the whole time that we're like pulling up there. I'm like, I can't believe I'm really getting to go hang out with Doug on the famed, Duran family farm. And it's just so cool. And to see so we spent the day with Doug. We drove around, the town there where he lives. I won't say it. You can hear Doug say it, but I won't. George knows where he is. But he took us around his hometown, and he had a story about everywhere that we went past, and that was powerful, to have that deep sense of place. And it was very relatable for me too. I don't think everybody's brain works the same, and I don't think it should. Like, we're all our own person. But that was something I could relate to. Recently, I think it was when was it? It was this was back in this past spring, and it might have it we were I was riding around with my dad on our family farm, and this was where my mom grew up, so not where my dad grew up. He cares about it, of course, because he's been in the family for almost 40 years, and but I'm like telling him all these stories about the farm there. I'm like, holy cow, this is exactly what Doug does. And so it's like building that connection there. And my coworker Nicholas, who does not hunt, he's hunted before. He said he likes to say, what I don't like about hunting is you can't talk while you're hunting. He's like, I want to talk. I don't want to just sit there and be quiet. But seeing him drawn into Doug's message and just seeing how powerful that is to be connecting now with somebody who doesn't even hunt, who just sees the passion of how Doug sees it. And then, of course, naturally, we're looking for, Hoksey, we're looking for good partnerships out there, people just like you do with Matt My Ranch.
Sure.
Who can we partner up with that we believe in their message? Of course, part of it is it's a marketing side too, right? Who's going to help? Who's going to, that's, you want to partner with somebody who's going to help your business too, right? Of course, you believe in their mission, but there's a reason why Sharing the Land shares the logos and the information of their partners. They're trying to help them out too, because they help us, we help them.
All grow together.
Exactly, we all grow together, and so it just seemed like a perfect fit. So of course we came on then as a sponsor. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't really fully I was aware of Sharing the Land, but until I really sat down with Doug and really learned like his vision with it, which anyone can do now. Savage Arms made a couple films, and they kind of talked through. The first one's about Aldo Leopold, and then the second one kind of goes back to Doug and talks a little bit more about how he views his land. And it's not ours, it's just our turn. And I believe Sharing the Land makes it in there too a little bit. You can really start to get the idea of what it is here. And what Doug is trying to really accomplish through Sharing Land is to get people to be connected to the land that they are accessing. And I don't want to do too much of a pitch here for sharing the land because I don't want to leave something out here. Doug would
Right,
explain
right.
it way better than me, but really what he's saying is, when we look for a place to hunt, we've all heard the noise going on about, it's so crowded on public land. It's so, I'd love to hunt, but I can't anymore. Which, by the way, having a conservation mindset opens up more acres for hunting. It really does. Because you know where a lot of people's ground, especially here in the Midwest, is gone that they used to hunt? It's gone into row crops. Yep. You can uh, look at that reality too. It's not just that, oh, we got so many people leasing ground. Yeah, that might be part of it. But a lot of it is we've lost so much habitat. Think of all the housing developments that have gone up since you were a kid. Think of all the fence rows that have been pulled out and all the hedgerows that have gone down and on and on and on, right? Wetlands drained. The one of the biggest reasons is because people don't value land the right way. They only see it in the short term, how, it is mine and it is my turn, instead of it's not ours, it's just our turn. It is mine and it is my turn. How can I profit the most off this land? That's the biggest reason why we have degraded hunting opportunities. But I'll get off my soapbox here a little bit. Sorry, I get a little worked up. And my face isn't as numb right now, so I'm getting a little fired up. So,
Nice, nice. I like it. I like
but
it.
but so Doug, through sharing the land, by allowing people to take a vested interest in the land that they would like to, the private land that they would like to access, they are working that land in a way that benefits conservation. There's unlimited ways what that can look like. It could be you're going out there, like I know he's had a lot of people come onto his farm that are access seekers through sharing the land, um, through doing some tree trimming,
Mhm.
and they've done some burning, some prairie
Sky
burning.
burns, sure. Mhm.
He talks about how he's had people shovel manure
Mhm.
in his cow barn, you know. Maybe like if you come out to Hoksey Native Seeds, we might have you, if you're a good mechanic, work on some equipment for us, because that helps us plant more prairies.
Right.
So there's the point is there's a million ways that this work can look like. And so really when I started to see, and then also seeing that this isn't just hey, an advertisement, almost like the block management or here in Iowa, we call it IHAP land, um, where it's like public or private land opened up to public access. It's not, that's how kind of how I thought it was at first. Like, hey, share the land. Yeah, find a way to let others get on your land. That makes sense. But it's a vetted process. Everyone who participates applies through sharing the land. They fill out an access seeker application. They list all the things that they're qualified to do, all their previous experiences, their conservation ethic, and then the landowner gets to review those applications, make phone calls, and say, yeah, you know what, I do feel comfortable with this person coming out and maybe hunting one day or one season or 1 week, however long, if someone just came out and, you know, yeah, maybe let's say helped you plant trees for 3 hours on a Saturday. Well, that's probably not worth an entire season of having the place to themselves for all of archery season for whitetails or something like that. But it's probably worth a morning hunt for pheasants. And so it's a controlled, like, hey, I know when you're there, I know what you're up to, I know when you're coming, I know, like, and I have a way to contact you if
Mhm.
something's not right. It's a very safe, like protected way for landowners to say yes to access seekers in a way that makes sense for their farm. And once I started to see that, it was like, wow, this is something that a lot of people could do. And Nicholas and I were like, man, we could probably do this at Hoksey. We have, 500 plus acres of production fields, and now some of those are rental properties, so that takes in a new consideration. You obviously
Mhm.
got to be
make sure that the landowner's on board with you doing share the land on their land,
Sure,
even
sure.
though you are renting it. So we went ahead and enrolled our owned acres that are good, great pheasant hunting habitat. It turns out working for a place that grows prairie grass, that opens up some great hunting opportunities if you like to hunt pheasants.
I can
So
imagine.
old Theo has been able to enjoy his new hunting opportunities. But
Nice.
so we enrolled as a uh, cooperating landowner within sharing the land to allow people to participate in work days, earn some time pheasant hunting, and we'd like to expand that, as we get more familiar with it and see how it goes for this first year, with the hunting side of it. We've already had some guys come out and do some work for us. And Doug came down for that. There's a series coming out. I don't know how much I'm allowed to divulge about this, but there will be a series that comes out. I think it'll be on X's YouTube channel.
Mhm.
They sponsored it for Doug, and he comes and does a work day with us. I think we had 6 axis seekers that showed up that day to dig up some big blue stem, which is a good native species, but it was growing in the wrong production field. And if you don't, big blue stem is an apex grass species. It'll take over. It'll dominate.
Yes.
It's actually my
Yes.
favorite native grass species for that reason. It's just kind of the boss. I think it's cool.
Oh
It ain't
yeah.
going anywhere.
No,
But
we got some of that growing at our place too.
that's great.
I know
That's
all
great.
about it. Yep.
Yep. So it gets those big 13-foot deep root systems on it. But we had them come out. That's hard physical work, digging that stuff up, flipping it, chopping it,
Sure.
but it has to be done. So we had a bunch of guys come out, and then we did a bunch of hand harvesting with them too. That's part of what we do, and so we're looking to expand on that in the future, having more work days and more projects that we can get to help. So that really paints the picture for the other benefit. Not only is it just a system that allows people to gain access and gain value for that land, because I can tell you right now, those 6 guys, they care a whole lot about how Hoksey's doing and how that Indian grass field's looking after they put their blood, sweat, and tears into getting that big blue stem out of there, right? They've
Absolutely. They're
developed a
invested.
deeper, right?
Hmm.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Perfect word, invested. And so, so with that, hopefully we can expand on that, have more guys come in for more projects, but also from Hoxie's side, we got a really challenging job that we couldn't do with just, I forgot to mention, we also have like seasonal help that comes in during the summers, when college students or high school students that are available for work to help us with weed control in our fields and stuff. Cause we literally manage a lot of our weeds with hose and shovels. Um, it turns out there's not Roundup Ready little blue stem, that you can just blanket spray. You got, but so we can't get all this work done with our workforce. It just wouldn't be possible. But with sharing the land, it is, and so we benefit from that by having this partnership, and we build trust with all these guys, and we've had relationships with them. I've talked to pretty much all those guys that came out since that work day, and now come November when it's pheasant season, they're all going to come back out, and we're going to get to hunt some birds together and see how Doug's shot is with a scatter gun and see if Theo can point some birds for a few people and just what a fun day it will be, all because of this vision that Doug caught on to. And he'll tell you this too. He kind of stole the idea from Aldo,
Yeah.
because Aldo was doing this with the Riley Game Cooperative
Mhm.
back in I think it was the 1920s or 30s or something like that. But had gone away and hadn't been done for almost 100 years. And Doug kind of breathed life back into it and made it a much bigger thing that they have all kinds of states participating now. And I don't know, you probably feel this way too, George, with Matt My Ranch being such a critical part of as a sponsor and partner with sharing the land. Like I just feel so honored to be part of it in the early days. And as we see sharing the land grow, um, long past our time, I really think. Man, when you're talking about an honor to be a part of something, that's pretty big. That's pretty special where you're impacting hunting. Yes, you're making that better for people, right? You're creating opportunities because there's a lot of education that goes into this too with
Oh
helping
yeah.
new hunters. That's a big part of what Doug's wanting to do with sharing the land. So you're helping new hunters, you're freeing up access, and you are extending a conservation ethic and education to so many more people by allowing them to grab a piece of dirt that they can connect to. Even if they never are a landowner in their entire life, they have that place where they have put sweat equity into that ground,
Mm-hmm.
and they can understand the value of that. So then when they go driving by with their carload of people that know nothing about that ground, they can say, "Hey, you see that field over there? Yeah, I dug big blue stem. You know what big blue stem is? That's got a 13-foot root system. Some of those plants had probably been in there for years. And we dug and we sweated all through our clothes. It was a 92-degree day, like, and there's value to that. And guess what that little kid who's sitting in the back of the car thinks when he hears his dad saying that? Wow, that's cool. I want to do something like that. I want to impact these ecosystems around me for the better.
Those are all great points, great vision that you have of all of it, and I couldn't agree more. It is an absolute honor to be a part of this project. When that
Oh yeah.
opportunity arose, it was a no-brainer. Colin and I were, he's the other half of Met My Ranch. We were just all in on it, and
Hmm.
every year that Doug wants us to be a part of it, we will.
Yep.
We make the maps of the land, owners or the
Yeah.
collective agencies that do that, and it's something that we're so glad to be a part of. And I think it's almost like as I, evolve in my hunter days,
Yep.
growing up, it was just like, oh, cool. I just want to go out there and hunt and learn new things. And then now I'm on that next kind of generational mode of like wanting to be able to make sure I'm leaving something behind and that all the things that I got from
Yeah.
my uncle and his friends, my family, the things they taught me, that I'm passing that on and that I'm being that next generation. I'm helping to bring up that
Yeah.
next generation. I mean, we have a friend of ours, I would call him Johnny Boots. He's coming out in a couple of weeks to our ranch to take his first deer. And he's,
That's awesome, man.
6 months ago, he had never shot a rifle. And,
Wow.
he's a great shot.
That's
And
powerful.
it is, man. And my buddy Matthew Mitchell and I, we're talking about it. And during one of the interviews, we kind of mentioned how it is the sharing the land ethos of what we're
Hmm.
doing. He's coming
Yep.
out there. He's got sweat equity. He learns how the ranch works. He's put in a lot of time and energy. And now he has this connection that is something it's hard to measure, as an outsider. I don't know what it is for him. It's hard to measure for him maybe too, but it's like he's going to now take that home. He's got
Yep.
two boys. He wants to bring them up in the outdoor lifestyle. He didn't have this growing up, but he wants to be able to give them this opportunity because he loves it.
Yep.
And, like, we've kind of touched on a lot of that today too in our conversation, but that being able to be a part of each incrementally, on the landowner side, and then on being able to provide a tool that is a good use, in the toolbox, and then just being able to get close to a lot of the people who are so heavily involved that you and I have been able to interview. There's
Hmm.
some overlap we've had there too, and then just being, I think, in the lifeblood of this, and being able to continue to be good conservationists and like-minded people who are sharing this information and showing that, hey, we're involved and it's not just fun, take, what can we give back? And
Right. Yep.
you're doing it, I'm doing it, we're seeing Doug do it, and all these other people, Meat Eater, there's people who are all around that are doing this. And I think it's a real blessing to be able to be a part of that, these movements, and to be a part of passing this on to future generations and inspiring those. And I applaud you for all the things you're doing and continuing to do in that realm too.
Hey,
And it's been fun to kind of
appreciate
hear you
that.
talk about it all.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Yeah, I think you summed that up beautifully. A thought that kind of popped in my head the way you were saying that was, when I was growing up wanting to hunt, it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to. I was looking at hunters and being like, wow, that's a person who's got it figured out. I want to be like that person. It was more of, no, I just want to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine if and a lot of the people that you just mentioned are contributing to this, and I think have already changed the dial to be more in favor of this mindset. But imagine if we got to a point where people who didn't hunt were able to look at hunters collectively and say, that is an admirable person that I want to be like, almost like a fireman or a military officer or a doctor or like a surgeon or something, or an astronaut, where you like look at that person, you're like, that's a person who's thoughtful about what they're doing, that's a person who knows uh, what their limitations are and tries to expand what they're able to do. That's a person who cares about the land that they're accessing, and they're not just taking, they're giving back far more than they're taking. That I want to be a hunter because I want to be like a hunter, not just because I want to hunt. And imagine if that change took place following our generation right now, so that when it no longer is our turn and we're handing it off, it's just a whole new hunting would be in such a better place if that was our focus. And I do also want to say, going back to the Map My Ranch side of this, I wanted to work this into what I was talking about, or no, I knew I was forgetting something. I'm so excited to like get there to those maps and be able to be like, so, normally now, because I coordinate some pheasant hunts every year, instead of being like, okay, when you see that, kind of this edge that kind of works north, northwest, and you see, now I'm going to be able to go on that map and I'm going to be like, because I just can't wait to get out the dry erase markers, because we got the laminated one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna be like making a little X and like, okay, we're gonna push this way, and I think the birds are gonna move this way, and so that I'm super excited for the Map My Ranch part of part B for this experience, and that's gonna be on film too. So
Nice.
I'm sure there'll be a nice up and close look at the Map My Ranch map that we're gonna have for our pheasant hunt day when Doug
Cool.
comes back in November and
Well, I mean,
all of our access seekers come back.
it's such
That'll
a,
be pretty
I
cool.
can't tell you how many hours we spend around maps. I mean, I have multiple ones
Yep.
on the wall. We had a little island in the kitchen, and like one day I was loading up, I think I was getting gas and diesel for the tractors, and I saw this guy who had a glass company and he had a bunch of panes of glass. And I was like, hey, we actually have this island. I thought it'd be cool to have a map underneath it and have, glass on top of it
Oh
that we
yeah.
could be able to, just have it there. And he's like, well, I got some extra sheets of glass. And I was like, well, I measured it and this is what I need. He's like, he had one that was like 1 inch shy on both sides. I was like, this is going to be perfect. So
Oh,
I
that's
cut it off, and
cool.
my buddy's like, what are you doing? He like went inside to get something to drink or something. He's like, you're buying sheets of glass. I was like, it's an idea I've had for a long time. But I pulled it back, and I was like, you'll see. And so now we just sit around looking at that, and you can use, dry erase markers
Oh
on that as
yeah,
well.
that's
But
sweet.
we spend so much time talking about where the next hunt's going to be, or, hey, we're going to be clearing this area. Or, hey, we want to go ahead and plant, our Indian grass, switchgrass, partridge pea, all the different,
That's
bundle
awesome.
flower, all the different things we're going to be doing and clearing. And we got another 10 acres we're going to be doing this next year. We've just cleared it. But in the spring we'll replant. But that's something that we just spend so much time around it, man. And
Yeah.
it was very self-serving when we first, did this. It was like my buddy and I just like, hey, let's create this map and for our family. And then realizing how much of a tool that was. And, it's like, that's not my day job. It's a side job, but I love it,
Yeah.
man. I like being a part of it and being able to meet people like you, Doug. It's all encompassing, man. So it's been a lot of joy, and I love it when people are able to use that. And because I'm like, yes, we do that ourselves.
Yep.
Like, and it's one of my biggest joys. It brings around, I mean, the campfire, right? You're
Yep.
sitting around there chatting after a hunt or whatever you're doing, and it's like you bring it together, you sharing stories. The map is the same thing, and the macrocosmic level of whatever property you're on, you're sharing those stories, and then sitting around that and being like, okay, this is where I was when I saw this thing, and so
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
this
I
is when
love that,
Theo
man.
jumped that big group. Yeah,
That's
whatever.
right.
It's fun to be able to share,
Exactly.
man. It's fun. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
I'm
such a
excited
good
to see
point.
that.
I don't think I've ever viewed it quite that way before, but you're spot on. We do, especially as hunters, man, we're always pulling up, all right, don't tell anybody I showed this to you, but you see this little spot over here? Yeah, there is a monster hanging out. This one time, You're exactly right, man. It starts so many conversations and stories, and they're icebreakers too with new people, which is a
Yeah,
big part of sharing the land.
it is, man. It is. Well, look, we're going to have to come again and another time and have you on and talk more in depth about this stuff. I just had a thrilling conversation with you. And before we kind of sign off, I have one question before we get to your socials where people can follow you, and that's
Yeah,
the idea of legacy. And I know that we've not to rewind all the things we just kind of talked about necessarily, but I think we can pick and pull some of those things too. Is it, I've been talking to people about what it is that they want to be known for, what it is that they want to leave
sure.
behind. And I feel like while I might be able to guess at some of the things here too, and maybe we even discuss some of them, if you can kind of just recap in some of these ideas of like the work you're doing now, the work you want to do, how you want to be remembered, and as far as these things and these imprints that you've left, in a professional level, and then also in a personal. And if you could just kind of expand on that a little bit, I'd really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's a really awesome question. I like that. That's caused me to think deeply, and I do want to say too, this has been a ton of fun. The time has flown while we've been here, and I appreciate you letting me ramble for as much as I do. I have the gift of gab, but
It is a gift. You're good at it, man. Yeah, I wasn't going to stop you. I might
appreciate
say if
that.
there's some drool, I'd let you
Yeah,
know. I
that's
mean,
right. It's well, you know
that's
what? I
it.
can kind of feel it now. I can feel it pooling a little bit. My face numbness is going away.
It's receding.
So
That's good.
now it's just searing pain. No, I'm just kidding. It's all good. But
Pushing through it. You're pushing through it.
that's right. But no, I once said to my wife, my favorite drink is Arnold Palmer. I just
Mm-hmm.
love Arnold Palmer. I told her my goal is to become so important and to drink so much Arnold Palmer that they call it Kent Boucher eventually. But I'm just kidding. That's not what I want for my legacy. I just did that to get a big eye roll from my wife when but
Nice.
no, my legacy is um what I really want for my legacy. One of the things that I think all of us content creators run the risk of is narcissism. And, narcissist, that word comes from was a Greek god, Narcissus, who was always obsessed with his personal beauty, right? And I mean, you can go right down the line. When we do podcasts, we're sharing our point of view. When we do Instagram posts or Facebook posts or whatever social media you're on, or you get invited onto other podcasts like I'm doing right now, the temptation is you can start to think like, man, everyone needs to tune into me. Everyone needs to view things like I view them. I have the answers. And that's a dangerous and a painful reality that I think all of us need to look at. And one of the things, like, you ever like when you look at like the news apps on your phone, or like if you have an iPhone, if you like swipe over on your home screen
Mm-hmm.
and it like pulls up all the headlines, and sometimes I'll see articles that are like, how to know if you're a narcissist, or how to identify a narcissist in your life. And I always feel so compelled to read those things because I'm worried, how do I match up? Am I a narcissist? And chances are, if you're married, your spouse will tell you. But but in reality, we probably all are to some extent. And so what do I want my legacy to be is not just, I want people to, when I'm, dead and they're like, what was Kent? Well, he wasn't a narcissist. That's not my legacy. My legacy that I would like to be would be somebody who kind of does the opposite of that. Somebody who cared about others. Somebody who um, uh, looked for ways to benefit more than just his circumstance. And that encompasses all kinds of things. That encompasses financials, that encompasses social standing, that encompasses even how your own family is doing. But somebody who like understood the bigger picture, you know. And I think there's different levels to that. I'm a religious person. I think there's an eternal value there. Um, that needs to be looked at, is how we view others' spiritual well-being. I think there's an earth, like a world-sized aspect to that? Like, how did you leave the world a better place in some way? I think there's even like our niche communities that we're a part of. It could be for you and me, it's going to be the hunting community, right? And the conservation community. And how did Kent impact those aspects, all of that stuff for others? And so I guess, when I'm gone, I hope there's a lot of people that look back and say, man, that guy, he really, he wasn't perfect. Everybody knows that. But he sure helped. He sure helped me in this way. Or he was a neighbor to so and so, and that person said that, man, we didn't always see eye to eye on everything, but I knew one thing for sure. Kent wanted what was best for X, Y, and Z. And I hope those things are related to how I've helped other people. And right now I feel like, I had 8 years of doing that as a teacher. So that was kind of easy, just to not easy, like it was easy to do, but easy to draw the connection of like, I'm teaching people stuff. I'm helping them with their social emotional learning, their education and so forth. But now being in this role, I hope people look at Iowa, which is the most terraformed landscape on the planet. We've lost what Iowa was almost completely. There's a phrase in the book, Food. I haven't read the book, but a friend of mine told me this phrase from that book, that Iowa is just as much modified from its original landscape as is Manhattan Island, New York. And so I hope people look back and say, wow, Kent helped get the ball rolling to get Iowa closer to what it should be, a healthier landscape, so that people can enjoy better hunting, people can enjoy better fishing, people can enjoy just having a place to escape to that isn't degraded with asphalt and concrete and tilled dirt and just signs of something that used to be healthy but is no longer. And I think if I keep others as that focus and wanting to serve those communities and those aspects of where I live and when I live, then I think the legacy will kind of take care of itself to whatever level that it can be known.
Great answer, Kent. That is great, man. You've helped to plant the seeds of knowledge with the kids. You're planting the true seeds at Hoksey Native Seeds, and it sounds like you're planting all this information that's going to continue to grow, and something that's going to be left behind through your podcast. I mean, having that something that's tangible, people can always listen back to, and like you're sharing other people's ideas of like what they've done and their experiences. You're kind of continuing to echo out that rippling of knowledge, and you're always going to, people are always going to be able to look back on that, and you're always doing these things right now that are going to pay dividends down the road for other people's awareness, education, and entertainment, as well. And so I applaud you for all the things. I really love your shows, the podcasts, and what you're sharing. You're more than welcome, man. And let's dive into where people can kind of, if they have not yet had the chance to dive into these, where can people subscribe to your podcast and follow you online so that they can continue to learn about your journey as you're going through it?
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you so much, George, for having me on your show. Loved it. This was just a fantastic way to spend, a couple hours and just chilling with a guy who I like talking with, so appreciate that. And looking forward to having you on my show, which is the First Gen Hunter podcast, as George mentioned, and it's been going since 2020. So yeah, I think we're up in the 170s now for episodes, and we've had some tremendous guests on there. Of course, George is going to be on there eventually, and I've had some of the same guests that George has talked to, and you might look at that and be like, yeah, but I'm not a first gen hunter. Well, there's far more than just stuff for new hunters. We have interest stories. Like we interviewed this guy who was like had his face basically removed by a grizzly bear, and he fought his way by himself back to safety, 10 miles or so into the backcountry, something like that. I can't remember the exact distance, but he self-rescued himself. So we got stories like that. We have elk content, mule deer content, whitetail content, bear content. I think there's some antelope in there. There's a muskox story in there, some moose hunting. It's all over the board. Small game, land management, land, buying land, all that stuff. We just try to cover every aspect of hunting in some way. We're probably a mile wide and an inch deep sometimes, but some things, we get really deep into. Almost everything divulges into a shed hunting conversation because I'm obsessed. But we got all that, and then of course the other podcast we run is the Prairie Farm Podcast, and that's a much more of everything's a conservation undertone, which there's a lot of that on the First Gen Hunter podcast, of course, but on the Prairie Farm Podcast, we talk to, yes, a lot of hunters, a lot of people from the hunting community, like Doug and Ryan Callahan and Sam Soholt, would be maybe some of the names people would recognize. And then of course, a lot of other guys that you've never heard of before, but are, great hunters or tied to the hunting industry in some way. But we also have like homesteaders, and we have butterfly people and gardening people, and a lot of land management, a lot of wildlife specialists. We interview the guy Carter Niemeyer, who was the boots on the ground agent for Wildlife Services, or APHIS, part of the USDA APHIS program, who helped trap and relocate wolves from Canada into Yellowstone in the mid 90s. He was the boots on the. He was the guy who was cutting the ropes, and cutting them loose on Yellowstone. So you got guys like that, all over the place, and but all with that conservation backstory. We got some stuff on the history of prairie. We put a docu-series together, so if you like that more of that highly edited theme music, all that stuff going on, we got some series like that. Just a lot of fun doing that show. But yeah, those are the two podcasts, and if you want to follow along, you can follow Hoksey at Hoksey Native Seeds on Instagram, and the Prairie Farm, I think, is just at the Prairie Farm, and then you can follow me at first.gen.hunter, and love to interact with you. If you guys ever have any questions about planting some prairie, how to do it, how to prep the ground, how to take care of it, all that stuff, I'd be happy to help you any way that I can, or any hunting questions or anything like that, or whatever else, maybe cheers and jeers. Remember when Field and Stream used to have the cheers and jeers section in there? Maybe you got some things that you want to complain to me about, or whatever. I'd love to interact with you. That's the best part of doing all this stuff, is talking to the people that actually listen to us, right?
Yeah,
and so reach out. Love to hear from you. And George, just thank you again, man. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Well, it takes one to know one, man. I'm looking forward to us sitting around a map or a campfire, enjoying
Absolutely.
a nice cold Kent Boucher one day, formerly known as Arnold Palmer, and that's
formerly known as.
Yes. But yeah, man, I look forward to getting together and chatting in person, and having join your podcast, having you back on, and continuing to stay in touch, man. This has been a blast, and yeah, everyone go check out Kent Boucher. Look at all the pages that I'll have them all listed below. Follow them all. We got some great stuff going on, man. Thanks again for joining us.
Hey, for sure. Thanks, George.
All right, take care.
See ya.